tonight and glad to talk to you as well.
I'm your state senator, Kevin DeLeon. I'm your Senate Pro Tem leader. I am a registered Democrat who enacts socialist policies. And I'm very glad here to be at Villa Gardens tonight and to see old and new friends in the city of Pasadena and some friends from Monrovia and the greater community. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Pat Harris. Thank you. I'm running for the U.S. Senate also. I am, for 24 years, I have been a civil rights and criminal defense attorney here in California. And my platform and the reason I'm running is based on the fact that I believe we are at a unique point in history where we have to have fighters. We have to have people who stand up. And that's what I've been doing for the last 24 years of my life. I spent my time in a courtroom fighting corporations, some of which we were just talking about Dr. Bill, like Pfizer, Big Pharma, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. That's what I've done, and I believe, given the circumstances we are under at this point, I believe we got to have people who are willing to stand up and fight for what I think is an amazing new potential for a progressive agenda that's going to take us to heights we've never seen before, including Medicare for all.
I am Jerry Perez, Field Director of the Allison Harkison Campaign. I am a Marine Corps veteran. I am currently the regional coordinator for Justice Democrats and all of our outstanding volunteers in the back right here. Allison Harkison is a former high school teacher of Orange County and also the former director of WOPAC and running a progressive campaign with no corporate money and completely people-powered.
Supposed to be just who you are, but anyway, I said you can have 1 minute to have your formal introduction speech. Timekeeper Dennis over here, raise your hand. He's going to keep time, and he'll give you a 30-second and a 10-second warning. So I'm going to give you another minute to do the official minute introduction. So, for 1 minute.
You ready? Timekeeper Dan? Yes. Dennis?
1 minute.
You gave me 2. Time's up.
All right.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out today to Pasadena. I hope you all didn't have too much traffic. It took me 40 minutes to get here from the Valley, which is typical in our city. My name is Cameron. I'm proud to represent our United States Senator Dianne Feinstein. The Senate is in session, otherwise she'd be here herself. But she has proudly served California in the United States Senate, and she's asking for your support once again. As many of you all know, Senator Feinstein is the leading Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee and is really committed to achieving many of our goals moving forward, whether that be stopping Trump's judicial nominees who are anti-LGBTQ, who are anti all the things that we as a community stand for, whether it be making sure that assault weapons and guns are off of our streets and out of our schools, whether it be standing up and making sure that every American has access to health care in this country. Senator Feinstein is committed to that, and that's why I'm happy to be here with you all, engage with you during this Q&A, and answer any questions afterwards. Thank you for having me.
So yeah, I'm David Hildebrand. I'm the pro-union working class candidate for U.S. Senate. I already mentioned I'm a Democratic Socialist, and I'm also corporate free. So the reason I'm corporate free and why I've been running corporate free since March is because every time we see a social ill that can't seem to be solved by our legislators is because we find in the background corporations funding our politicians on that issue. Single-payer health care is one of the #1 issues we see in California, the most progressive state in the nation. So I'm not here to placate any corporations. I only stand for the people. I've been, for over 6 years, a legislative analyst for the state of California. I worked for over 70 hours in the Bernie Sanders campaign, so I have some experience. Not only legislative experience, experience working on bills, seeing what the bills do on a policy and fiscal level, and seeing whether they're good for the state, but also out on the ground canvassing and becoming a canvas captain, and finally a staging location director for the entire Congressional District 6 for the Bernie Sanders campaign. So I've canvassed for single payer, and I've canvassed for other campaigns as well, and I thank you for having me tonight.
I would challenge another legislative leader as myself to find another more progressive legislative body in our union. I am the head of the most progressive legislative body in the entire country. If we look what we've done on every issue that should be very dear to your hearts, on the environment, California now has the most progressive emissions laws in the nation. We also are the face of resistance against Donald Trump's Islamophobic and anti-immigrant agenda in America. We are the face. I am the face of this movement. When Donald Trump came to came to California a couple days ago, he visited the wall. We passed the California Values Act that made it illegal for federal organizations to help with deportation and for our local law enforcement not to engage in any deportation activities. And we will hear more about this agenda, and thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you. I did say earlier, and I do believe this very strongly, we are on the verge of something amazing. We are on the verge of a new progressive movement, a movement that is going to take us to places we've never seen and dreams we have yet to dream. Because we have taken the control of this party. We are going to become the Democratic Party. We're going to reform this Democratic Party, and we're not going to take this country back. We're going to take this country forward. Yes. And we are going to do that with things like single-payer health care. We're going to do it with real criminal justice reform, where we get rid of for-profit prisons, where we do have real bail reform. We are going to do it by having 100% renewables by 2045. We're going to do it by getting equal pay and equal rights for women. We are going to have an agenda that is going to be absolutely phenomenal. I believe that it is always darkest before the dawn, but I believe the dawn is coming. And I believe we are going to come out of this, what is one of the worst periods in our history, we're going to come out with one of the greatest periods that we've ever seen. My name is Pat Harris, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate. Thank you.
Unfortunately, Allison Hartson fell ill on her way here, so she was not able to attend. From what I've met and what I've seen from Allison Hartson, she is an outstanding woman of integrity, vision, and leader. Currently, what she is fighting for is Medicare for all, preschool and college for all, higher wages, and to end corruption and save our democracy. Currently, right now, we are working together and building the communities up in order to safeguard our communities from corruption. Thank you all.
Thank you. So we have 3 questions prepared, and we'll just start from here, and then the second question will go this direction and vice versa. Okay, so for Allison Hartson, or for everybody, starting with Allison, what would you do to improve? Are you ready for 2 minutes? Okay. What would you do to improve our healthcare system?
She would co-sponsor Bernie Sanders' single-payer Medicare for all bill. With her experience working on legislation and getting measures passed through several state legislators, as well as building volunteer infrastructures for tens of thousands of volunteers, we know that this has been done with a combination of education campaign to both constituents and legislators. In the meantime, we must protect the ACA and push SB 562, California's Medicare for All, forward state by state. Pressure is a successful path towards national victory. But we need to be sure and push both. A national single-payer system is what we need.
Thank you. The first thing I will do when I'm elected is I will walk across the aisle and I will become the second Senator Harris from California to sign Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill. I will tell, I do believe very strongly that one of the problems we've got, one of the reasons I'm running, is at the local town hall, Senator Feinstein referred to the Medicare for All movement, single-payer movement, as government takeover. That's the problem we've got, when our own senators believe that. There is going to be, when this is brought up, money like we've never seen before, trying to defeat this. Okay, you're going to see like it's going to make things like Obamacare and that fight look like child's play. We have to have people who are willing to go out and push this, who can sell this, who can stand up to these people. That's what I've done. I fought Pfizer. I took on Pfizer in court and I beat him. I've taken on just about every major corporation in this country. I'm not afraid to stand up to them, and that's what we're going to have to do. Because we can talk about the bill, we can talk about putting it together, but we got to sell this to the country. We got to market this thing and make sure this country understands that what they're hearing is a batch of lies, what they've been told about it. We have got to convince them what is right, and we got to have the people who have the capability to do it, and that's what I have. But I want to take one further step. Medicare for All is step one, and it's an important one. But healthcare in this country involves a lot of other things, especially going into minority communities where we are dealing with problems with clean water, with clean air. We are dealing with all kinds of issues that are not being addressed. We have to deal with healthcare for those in the most needy communities, which has been taken away. We have to focus on that. We have to make sure that everyone in this country has good health care, and we've got to do it by making sure that everyone has the basic rights to clean water, clean health, and clean air. Thank you.
First, we have to begin with the basic premise that healthcare is a human right for all. Can you either indicate with a finger snap or a hand raised that you agree with this basic premise? That is a human right to have some kind of medical care for all people. After seeing that, it comes down to, this is almost a two-part question. I see that many people in this room are wearing a button with healthcare, not warfare. So it comes down to a basic, what are we spending our money on? What are we as a country going to spend our money on? If we dedicated the trillions of dollars that we dedicate to waging war across every continent on this planet, maintaining a global industrial complex, rather than bringing healthcare to all citizens of America and non-citizens, all residents of America, we could do this as a nation. So it's a matter of national priority as to where we spend our money. As a co-sponsor for SB 562, I tried to bring this to California. Although it didn't get out of, it got out of the California State Senate, but it did not get into, it was not even heard by the California State Assembly, our sister legislative body in Sacramento. So I know how to pass health care. What I want to eventually go to is also be the first co-sponsor for Senator Sanders' Medicare for All, incrementally to eventually cover everyone. As the doctor said earlier, it's not Medi-Cal standards, but Medicare standards. This should be the national prevailing standard for citizens for all healthcare across this country, regardless of citizenship status or where you may live or how old you may be or any pre-existing healthcare conditions. Thank you.
Again, David Hildebrand. So the story of single-payer healthcare in California started in 1940s. You heard that correctly, in the 1940s. Since then, it's been tried to pass a couple times under Arnold Schwarzenegger. He vetoed it because he's a Republican governor. We had a Democratic Assembly and Senate, so they passed it through that easily, but then it got vetoed. So what's happening now? Corporate money. So if you look at the people who are most staunchly against single payer, that's what it is. It's corporate donors have given to them the most. It's almost completely across the board the case. So what would I do? I would pass single payer health care on the national level. So Bernie, yes, he has introduced a bill. There's several bills actually. Two of the ones, 676, or HR 676 and Bernie's bill S 1804. Here in California, I would have passed SB 562. About 10 years ago, I started promoting the idea of single-payer healthcare through community college debates. I did that through college. When Bernie came out and said, hey, I want to pass single-payer healthcare, I said, I'll sign up for that. And I went out and phone banked. I hated it. So then I went ahead and canvassed, and I love that. So I did that. Became a canvas captain for his campaign. Ended up being, like I mentioned earlier, a staging location director. I didn't really get into what that is. That's a canvas captain for an entire congressional district. So I was in the fight on the ground for this. When Bernie didn't get elected, I immediately went on to the SB 562 campaign, knocked doors, and helped canvas for that. Promoted it everywhere I could, joined every single march, protest, and rally. I didn't see anyone else there. So that tells you what you need to do. When it's time to fight for something, it's time to come out in public and fight for it and not say we're meeting behind closed doors. It's time to become a standard bearer for it, like Bernie's doing all over this country on his own time and his own dime.
Yeah.
All right, timekeeper. So there's a number of things going on as it pertains to healthcare at the federal level. And one thing I think we all know is that we spent most of this year playing defense, right? There were 4 attempts in the United States Senate to repeal the Affordable Care Act. There were over 60 attempts in the House of Representatives to repeal the Affordable Care Act. We defeated these Republican attempts to repeal the ACA. Obamacare is the law of the land. Now they repealed the individual mandate component in this awful tax bill, which guts the essential part of being able to keep funding prices affordable in our state. And so that's a big issue that the Senator is very concerned about. And so here's some of the things that she's actively working on right now in the United States Senate. First and foremost, she believes and supports lowering the eligibility for Medicare to 50 years old. You have a lot of people who are underemployed as they get older. You have a lot of people who are pushed out of the employment market. You have a lot of people who are having a hard time affording their premiums when they are in their 50s and early 60s. And so this bill would allow you to qualify for Medicare at 50 years old. She also is on another piece of legislation that would create a public option. She was a big supporter of the public option back during the Obamacare debate in 2009. For those of you who don't know, you all are very educated about healthcare. But for those of you who don't know, public option is essentially a government-sponsored health insurance program that competes with corporate health insurance programs in a goal to lower the overall cost of healthcare in our country, which is very important now that we find ourselves in a situation where the Republicans have repealed the individual mandate for the ACA. And then there's a lot of great ideas that all of us have heard about healthcare. You gave a wonderful presentation, sir. And so what all this comes down to, what everybody's talked about today, comes down to us winning back the United States Congress. Whether it's the House or the Senate, these bills ought to be debated. They ought to go through regular order. They ought to be taken up in the Finance Committee and the Health, Education, and Labor and Pensions Committee. And so we got to win back Congress so that we can move forward on all these great ideas that folks have.
Okay, 2 more questions, and I just want to let you know that there is a connection between all these questions. Just putting it out there. Okay, we're going to start with Diane
I'm on the
Feinstein.
spot again.
You're great. You can handle it. Okay, do you think we spend enough on the military?
I'm authorized to speak on behalf of the campaign, which is the center. And so, there's actually, this is a conversation that they're having right now in D.C. I don't know if you all know this, but the Trump administration has proposed spending anywhere from $20 to $30 billion on new long-range nuclear missiles. How many people think that's a bad idea? $20 to $30 billion. You know how many people we could feed for the cost of long-range nuclear missiles that would basically be a part of an unwinnable nuclear war that none of us ever want to see, right? And so the big thing to curb this Pentagon spending is more congressional oversight. Senator Feinstein has a bill with Mr. Markey of Massachusetts to provide additional congressional oversight and essentially prevent the Pentagon from being able to spend 20 to 30 of your dollars on a weapon that you all do not want and that you feel like we do not need. And so the key here is going to be more congressional oversight, more transparency, more involvement from communities knowing exactly what their dollars are going to. There have been those who have been proponents of being able to see what actually the Pentagon is spending your dollars on. A lot of us still don't even know what that is. And so that is something that the Senator has been a long time proponent of in the United States Congress. I would additionally say that there have been proposals even this year to increase Pentagon spending, and Senator Feinstein voted against it. There were numerous budget proposals that came up. DACA was not a part of it. There were other concerns that had to do with it. So this is something that is on our mind. This is something that she's thinking about. She has actual legislation right now to prevent anywhere up to upwards of $30 billion of your money being spent to go towards a weapon that you do not want.
Well, some people in the crowd know where I stand on does the military get enough money? So we just passed a $700 billion war budget under Trump, with many Democrats signing on to that bill. Not only is that more than we've ever spent, that's more than he asked for. Democrats voted for that. We need to stand firm against this. We need to end the military complex in this country. We need to stop being involved in wars, both directly and indirectly. What does that mean? No more boots on the ground. No more special ops boots on the ground. No more selling weapons or giving weapons to people that we think is the enemy of our enemy, because they're not our friend. They commonly turn against us. In Syria, there are several factions right now fighting each other. So when we go fund one faction, and they either turn code on us or screw up an alliance with another faction, or get overtaken, those weapons get moved all over the place. There's an article in the newspaper recently that ISIS, most of their weapons come from us or Europe. So we're actually funneling weapons into war zones that are getting taken by our enemies. So that's currently happening under the current administration, under past administrations. We are responsible for what's happening in Yemen. Saudi Arabia is our ally. We fund them with weapons, we sell them weapons, we fuel their aircrafts. We are responsible as a nation for the largest cholera outbreak in recent history, because of the famine and the pollution of the water in that area. They can't even clean their water. Yes, we have Flint, but imagine that being the whole country. Imagine children starving and dying because we want to fund the enemies of our enemies and try and make them our friends. The time for that is over. Let's shut it all down. Let's stop funding these other people. The military is wasting that money currently. We can reroute that money to actual defense and not offense.
As your California State Senator, it's another, again, what are we going to spend our money on at the national level? And I think we are entering now into the longest war we've ever seen in America's history. We've been in war with something for 17 years. And what has it gotten us? There is intersectionality between all of these issues. If you care about homelessness, you care about ending the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the other war in the theaters that we now are participating in Mali and other places to fight the global war on terror. So if you care about mental health issues, you care about ending the money to the industrial military complex. If you care about mental health issues and the opioid addiction that are destroying our communities, you care about the bill to have transparency in what weapons are funded through the Pentagon. I'd like to see a bill that doesn't fund any weapons through the Pentagon. Rather than have transparency, why should we have any weapons that are funded through the Pentagon? So, yeah, we can see which ones are there, but why don't we write bills that reduce the number of weapons that we are funding through the Pentagon? I think California is in a unique place right now. We are a nation state unto ourselves, and if we can go from warfare to peace to peace building, not destroying nations, we can go into more areas of trade. California trades along lines with many different countries through our national borders, and to go more for fair trade than free trade. We can lead with our values and lead with the things that have to do with immigrant rights and working along the lines of the environment, and not go along and destroy every country in the world. Thank you.
I'm going to to pick on him. I like you. So
I like
get
you
to pick
too,
on
Pat.
you. So there you go. When you say that the senator is interested in transparency, here's the deal. Congressman Barbara Lee from Oakland has for years been pushing a bill to allow the government to audit the Defense Department. Most people don't realize you can't audit the Defense Department. They can only audit themselves. She's been pushing that. She's been trying to get the transparency. Senator Feinstein did not support it. I got to tell you this because, interestingly enough, 2016 in December, a whistleblower leaked a report that the Defense Department had actually done themselves, their own audit. What did it show? It showed $25 billion a year in waste. $25 billion a year in waste over the last 5 years. Administrative waste. Not weapons, not wars, administrative waste. That's why we need to be doing what Barbara Lee's suggesting, which is we need to be auditing them, because when we talk about, you love to hear Republicans talk about the waste and how terrible the government is to spend all this money on social programs. The biggest social program in this country is the Defense Department. Yes. Okay. We can take that money, and this is what's frustrating, it's our priorities. We can take that money, we can use it for medical technology, for science, for scientific technology, for medical research, for those type of things. We can take $5 billion is what the Alzheimer's Foundation requested Congress, because they think about what that would do for this country if we could solve Alzheimer's and the amount of, just the effect that would have on us. Instead, we spend it on the Defense Department. We have got to stop it. We have got to get back to our priorities. And our priorities have got to be our people, the social programs, the thing that make our quality of life great in this country. That's what we need to be spending on, not more missile systems. Thank you.
There is zero accountability with our military budget. Currently, right now, they are going nuts, spending money on all kinds of outstanding things for the military, while we could be using those funds for the community, for Medicare for all, for a green infrastructure, for college for all, for single-payer health care. We need to redistribute those funds back into the community and not into endless war for profit.
Thank you so much. I just want to take this opportunity to say that thank you all for coming, surrogates and candidates, on a Thursday, and all of you for coming out on a Thursday night. And I have to tell you a secret, how I got them here. I said that we would vote to endorse one of these candidates, and that's why they're here. And I'm just going to turn that into a little plug for our club, which you have to have been a member of this club for 2 months before you vote on endorsement. We're going to vote on endorsement next month, April 19th. So if you have been a member before February, then you're going to be able to vote to endorse one of these candidates. So
We need to re-up our dues for
I've been reminding you. I've been texting you. So yeah, I just want to say that this club is energized. We're going to do more stuff like this. So we're going to do more endorsements. We're going to do more forums like this. So, come to me and ask how to sign up. Okay, last question. How do we make our schools safer?
Our schools are a microcosm of what is happening in our country at large. So gun reform will go a long way, closing loopholes on background checks, banning AR-15s, banning bump stocks, and mandatory gun insurance. But for our schools in particular, I can tell you that as a former teacher, our educators need better training on how to identify students who need help and then how to provide help. Schools and communities themselves need a better system for how to provide help for students who need support. She designed and taught an intervention program for our most at-risk teenagers. Some of these kids were in gangs, or their parents were in gangs. They were kids who were bullied, or who were bullies. She has been in some scary situations and has students who we suspected were of concern for their mental or emotional stability. She saw how educators didn't know how to address these situations or how to identify students who had different needs that often makes situations worse for all parties. To some degree, our hands are tied in terms of what we can and can't do to report students and intervene with as much care and support as possible. It's not easy, but we need to examine our laws with this in mind. Increasing the presence of metal detectors, guns, or police on campus is not the answer. Like all issues, we have to look at what is causing the problem so we can properly solve it. The problem here is that we have a lot of neglected kids due to crowded classes, overworked and underpaid teachers, and parents who are stretched thin trying to pay the bills. This is one of those areas where it may be hard to see, but addressing the other issues we care about: universal health care, living wages tied to inflation, universal pre-college, preschool through college, renewable energy for clean food, air, and water, reforming our K through 12 system. We go such a long way towards making our kids healthier and therefore our schools after.
Since the latest school shooting, we've heard a lot of ideas about how we can help make schools safer. We've heard some good ideas. We've heard ideas about raising the age in terms of when you can buy a weapon. We've talked about banning assault weapons and bump stocks and so forth. But there's incremental change. Those are changes that will help, but they're not going to stop the problem. We've got to go to the root of this problem. The root of this problem is the NRA.
Yeah.
This organization has been basically paying congressmen for years to support them, even some of the most ridiculous measures. When the public states overwhelmingly they are against it, the NRA go and pay their congressmen to vote for it, and they get their votes. You want to cut this off? Cut off corporate donations. That's how you're going to cut them off. All right. Let's cut them off at the knees. Let's stop it, because it is, we talk a lot about corporate donations, and like some of the other candidates, I am corporate free. I don't take corporate donations. We are going to have to go to the root of these problems, though, and that is the root of this problem. When we allow the NRA to essentially bribe congressmen to vote for them, you're going to continue to see the same results. Let's get corporate donations out. There's 4 ways to do it. I've got a 4-point plan. I'd be happy to talk about it when I've got some more time, or talk to you later about it. A 4-point plan on getting corporate donations out of this system. That's how we're going to solve this problem, because guess what? When a congressman's not getting the money from the organization, suddenly their interest in them dries up. That's what we've got to do. We've got to get these donations out. That's what's going to make not only our schools safer, it's going to make this entire country safer, and it's going to give us more than just gun legislation. It's going to give us things like Medicare for all and a living wage and the things we need. It all starts with getting rid of corporate donations.
Thank you, Pat, for your answer. And it also starts with regulating the bullets that are being fired into by these weapons. And as author of SB 1235 in California, we now have mandatory background checks for not people who buy guns, but for people who buy and sell ammunition. What are they doing? Why are they stockpiling the ammunition? Does someone really need 2,000 rounds of particular? That's a lot of skeet shooting for anyone who does any of that stuff, or anyone who does target practice. 2,000 rounds is a lot of bullets. So as an author of that, that's a practical law that could be taken nationally, and I'm sure our good friends at the NRA would have something to say about that when they've had. So also is what I believe is a SWAT team of marriage and family therapists led into our schools can do much more than a SWAT team responding to an emergency at school. We need to address the underlying issues. You could say that corporate donations are the reason why we have gun violence in our school, or that we have guns everywhere on our streets. But for every behavior, there is a need behind that behavior. Except for like maybe the 1% who just want to do some kind of depraved act. And what we need to do is identify these young people who are struggling with issues. There was so many. If you look at most of the major school shootings that have happened in America, there's so many red lights that were ignored, that were passed along, that where neighbors said, oh yeah, well, I wasn't really surprised when that happened. Why did we not say something? So it also has to do with our neighborliness and our concern for our fellow human beings in America. What are we doing as a people, as individuals, to help these people who might have underlying issues that may make them prone to have violence against their fellow classmates in our schools? Thank you.
Guns, guns, guns. We have a huge gun issue, and one of the reasons, as mentioned before, is because the NRA is a terrorist organization. Now, you've heard that from people before, and it gets applause lines and everything, but have you seen their videos? They literally tell legislators and news organizations, your time has come, we are coming for you. An organization that helps manufacturers sell guns. I've said it before online, in person, the NRA does not exist for your gun rights, for your safety. It does not exist for any of those things. It exists for one purpose, and you can see that in their legislation. It exists to sell guns and make manufacturers rich. Schools. One thing we need to do, obviously, is gun safety. I'm sure we all agree on the gun safety issue. Gun control issue, gun reform. We all agree on that. When it comes to schools, we need single-payer health care with mental health included. Yeah. We need people to go to the doctor and be ashamed to mention their mental health concerns by themselves voluntarily, or have other people mention them for them. And we need the actual system in place to cover those people when they do make that step. So we need coverage for those people. Right now, we have people on the streets, veterans on the streets, can't afford care. We have people unstable in our schools. One thing I don't mention, usually, I mention that I worked for 4 years in mental health. 3 of those years was in a school, a level 13 school for severely emotionally disturbed children. These are the children that are pulled out of schools and put into specialty schools. So I've seen violence in schools. I've had chairs thrown at me, people trying to stab me with pencils, food thrown at me. You know what didn't happen? I didn't need someone standing behind me with a gun. And I didn't need to wait for several minutes for a law enforcement officer standing outside the school to enter, and then he never did. Guns in our schools won't solve anything.
Guns. Sounds like everybody here supports Senator Feinstein's efforts on guns. Am I wrong about that? Okay, I am? Okay, well, let me tell you about the Senator's efforts on guns. She was the author of the original assault weapons ban, a piece of legislation that for 10 years banned assault weapons in this country. And we know that gun violence was down during that time. As a result of the NRA, that bill sunsetted in 2004, and she has reintroduced that bill numerous times ever since, including just last year. She believes, I don't know if you all know this, but there have been 400 school shootings since Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook was 5 years ago. There have been 400 shootings in schools since Sandy Hook. And so, yes, there's a mental health component, but there's also an access to these weapons component. Look, if you can be, you have to be 21 to buy a handgun in this country, but you only need to be 18 to buy an assault weapon, right? So, yes, we need to change the eligibility age, but really we need to take these guns off the streets. We also need to take things like bump stocks off the streets. Who had ever heard of a bump stock before October? Semi-automatic weapons have been banned in this country since the 1980s. Yet you can buy an adapter to turn, or automatic weapons have been banned in this country since the 1980s, yet you can buy an adapter to turn your semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon. I mean, there's just common sense things that we've got to fix. And the Senator has been the leader in the United States Congress for many years on this issue. So if you take issue with some of the work that she's done, then I'd love to learn about that at some point, Mr. Harris. But she is committed to taking guns off of these streets, getting them out of the schools. And let me just say something, because I heard our Secretary of Education is now leading a task force on education, on school safety, which I think is terrifying. I am a young black man raised by a single mom in LAUSD. I was suspended over 10 times. I never got in a fight. I was suspended because at the same rates that other young men that looked like me were suspended. Because someone perceived me to be a threat. Because of the color of my skin and because of the way that I expressed myself. Listen to me. I'd be dead. I would be dead if some of these teachers who came in there and were not used to talking to a young man that looks like me had access to a weapon. This is deeper than just schools and gun safety. I mean, when kids that look like me are getting shot in these streets and we're having people who are untrained with these weapons getting them, I hope that we also keep that in mind because it's very personal to me and my family as well. And so I know I've gone over my time, but I thank you all, and I hope we have some time to chat after this. Thank you for having me.
Our predetermined questions. I'm going to take 2 more questions from the audience, and it has to be a question that's not related to these 3 topics, and it has to be, we're going to give all of them the opportunity to answer them, so it can't be, specific to the candidate.
I know we all kind of touched on campaign finance a little bit, but I just wanted to know, like, specifically, where does everyone stand? Like, where do we need to be as a country, ultimately, when it comes to campaign finance reform?
Good question.
You ready?
Constitutional amendment to ban Citizens United. Corporations are not people. Corporations do not have the same rights as you and I. Corporations do not get treated as you and I. And the fact that they're able to give, there was a school board race. $14 million was spent on a school board race. That's supposed to be the most basic. Everybody should know who their school board member is, should have access to their school board member. I mean, talk about big money. $14 million just last year was spent on a school board race. The money, the corporate money, is outrageous. And the way that we fix that is the Supreme Court made an awful decision, and we have got to reverse it. So first and foremost, as we got to start at the top, my man, we got to have a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. Plain and simple.
So I believe the question was, what is the final result? Publicly funded elections is the final result. So step 1, yes, in Citizens United. We actually have 2 members of the race for U.S. Senate that accept corporate donations and have super PACs. So it's one thing to say you want to end Citizens United, it's another thing to actually practice that. So I don't accept corporate donations or have a super PAC. I believe Pat and Allison don't either. So that's an issue. So we can't say stuff on one hand and do the opposite. So we need to work our way towards publicly funded elections. I'm a big, bold move type of person. I believe in sponsoring and writing the bill as soon as I get into the Senate and not working on incrementalism. Incrementalism has sold us out. So I believe publicly funded elections on day 1 would be a bill that I put forward. So yes, we need to end Citizens United, but we need to go a lot farther than that to actually get money out. I've actually had a pledge online, I know I'm out of time just now, a pledge online to not vote for any candidates that accept corporate donations in the 2018 election cycle.
Citizens United and Citizens United.
I mentioned a minute ago I had a 4-point plan because what's been discussed, it's got to be more than that. We have to do a number of things. First thing we have to do is Citizens United, because of what we did and not allowing Merrick Garland and not fighting enough for Merrick Garland, allowed us to now have a Republican Supreme Court that is going to continue for the next 20, 30 years. First step we got to do is we got to treat Citizens United like the Republicans treated Roe versus Wade. We got to start chipping away at it every single year. We got to be filing cases, chipping away, because the Supreme Court is not going to overturn Citizens United. I can tell you that right now. It's a Republican Supreme Court. They're not going to do it. But we can chip away with it just like they've done with Roe v. Wade. Second thing is the constitutional amendment. They mentioned that to overturn Citizens United. That's the second step. Third step, look up a group called Represent Us. It's a terrific group. That has been formed that basically, to give you a short version, they believe you start at the bottom, work your way up through a series of local ballot measures, local ordinances, to cut back on things like school board races, those kind of things. Fourth thing, public financing, mentioned, that's the 4th step. But the thing we got to do is, not one of those is going to work. All 4 of them, we got to be pushing. That's the only way we're going to get it done.
Corporations are not people. Citizens United has to be undone. If you take 1 cent of corporate money, you have no business being a public servant. We are going to fight to ensure we undo this mess that has been unleashed upon America.
Thank you all very much for coming here. I did some homework before I got here, and if I believe correctly, there is only one of you who supports the death penalty. I believe there's only one of you who opposes universal tuition-free higher education for all. I believe there's only one of you who supports, who opposes Medicare for all, and I believe there's only one of you who opposes a $15 an hour minimum wage. So the question is to the one who is not the one of you, or there's also only one of you who was born with enough wealth and married into still more wealth to be able to guarantee that they will be among the top 2 finishers. So the question is to the other 4 of you, can we count on you to work together to rid us of this pest?
Absolutely, sir.
Look, I got in this race because I believe very strongly that the current senator from California has a very different attitude and a very different way of looking at things than I do. She looks at it, and she came to town hall, and she said, look, we don't need rabble-rousers in Congress. That's not what we need. That's exactly what we need. We need rabble-rousers. We need people who are willing to go up and stand for the very things you're talking about, like a $15 minimum wage, like single-payer health care. We need people who are going to fight. And you asked earlier why I disagree with what she's done on gun safety. It's because it's one thing to stand up and introduce something. It's another thing to fight for it. Look at what Elizabeth Warren has done to fight for Wall Street reform. Look at what Bernie Sanders has done to fight for health care for all. There's a hell of a lot of difference between introducing something and a difference between actually getting on television, getting on the radio, going out every single day of your senatorial career and fighting like hell for it. And that's what I'll do.
I always try to use my anatomical advantage. I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so I try to listen more than I try to talk. And I think your question was, will we unite to get rid of the pest in November? Did you say that?
That's what I asked.
Okay. So in June, we have a few elimination rounds, just like The Apprentice, I guess. Or Lost, or Walking Dead. Okay, take your survivalist course or TV show, and will we work together? After June, you're going to have 2 choices, and it's going to be the sitting senator, Senator Feinstein, and myself. And we would look. And we appreciate the 54% of the vote that the California Democrats gave us at the party endorsement. Although we didn't receive the 60% threshold, we would love to have your support. And we had support from all different parts of the California State Party, and we appreciate that support. And we will work. We welcome the help from Mr. Harris and the other candidates, Allison and from David. When we head into June and we go head towards our sitting senator, the campaign would love to sit down and hear what policies that they were working with. I'm sorry. And we would love to have your cooperation with helping us win in November. Thank you.
So I made a promise at the Field of Burn Democratic Club where I got the endorsement during the debate there that yes, I would support any other progressive candidate for this race. What is a progressive? Someone who does not take corporate donations. So you will not see Allison, Pat, or me attacking each other online. We are the corporate-free progressive candidates. We do not attack each other. Do we attack people who take corporate donations on the fact that they take corporate donations? Do we attack people on policy issues? Yes. We will do that. I tell people, I am not as nice as Bernie Sanders. He's a great guy, but I am not that nice. When it comes to issues that basically representatives don't represent us and take corporations' money and do things like that, those are huge issues that affect us when it comes to representation. We are not represented currently. So if we want to have more of the same lack of representation, vote for a corporate candidate. If not, vote for a corporate-free candidate. And you have 3 options.
Bobby, no, I'm going to say something. Bobby, you put me in a really awkward position. I asked that you have a question that's directed to all of the candidates. So, moving forward, please adhere to that rule. And I just want to have a positive atmosphere. Let's just say that. You are perfectly...
Very quickly.
Okay.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, everybody, for your hospitality and welcome us here today. But I have all the respect in the world for anybody who stands up and offers themselves up to serve. I have all the respect in the world for all 4 of these folks, and I think, and I'm going to treat you all with respect, and you should know that. A lot of things that you said, sir, were simply not true, okay? The senator is not in support of the death penalty, okay? She voted to repeal the death penalty when it was a ballot measure on the ballot last time. So that is inaccurate, and I want everybody in this room to know that.
That is a change, though.
It is a change. So, but it's been a change for about the last 10 years. So I don't know where you did your research, but it's not up to date, sir.
Started when you first met.
I'm sorry.
It started when you first met. You kept off the years.
Well, okay. I'm going to continue on. And so with that, I just want you all to know that I hope you can. What were the other 4 things? Because you said you went around.
$15 minimum wage.
The senator supports a $15 minimum wage.
Free higher education.
Where did you get the information that she does not support a $15 minimum wage? The senator supports a $15 minimum wage. There are numerous other pieces of legislation that have not been voted on in the United States Senate, but yes, I appreciate it. There are numerous ideas and pieces of legislation that you've mentioned that have not come up for a vote in the United States Senate, and it's not Dianne Feinstein who's preventing that, sir. Regardless of who you support in this Senate race, I hope we all agree that Democrats ought to take back control of the United States Congress, of the United States House of Representatives, and the United States Senate. But to sit here and say that she's in support of the death penalty is simply inaccurate, sir. To sit here and say that she does not support a $15 minimum wage, something I personally worked on, is simply inaccurate, sir. And so with that, I just want to thank you all. And one last thing I want to say, Mr. Harris. A freshman senator named Dianne Feinstein got the assault weapons ban passed when no one said it was possible. When no one said it was possible. When no one said it was possible, Dianne Feinstein worked a day and night to get that bill passed. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody else who has been able to get the big pieces of legislation through as Dianne Feinstein. So to say that she doesn't work towards things, she just introduces things, I hope you reevaluate her record. And with that, I hope all of you all will keep an open mind as you move forward in this election. Thank you so much for welcoming us, and I'd be happy to stay out.
Good evening. My name is Mark Ramos. I'm the regional director for the California Democratic Party here in the area. I'm also president of United Food Commercial Workers Local 1428. We represent folks in the grocery industry, food processing, healthcare, 1.3 million members across the country. A lot of good questions, a lot of good answers, but one of the things that I did not hear was addressing outside of the $15 minimum wage, which in California we all know is not enough to even rent an apartment. AFSCME versus Janus and national right to work are 2 really, really big things that are going to happen here in this country. I would like to know, whether you're a surrogate or the candidate yourself, how do we fight back against an anti-worker, anti-family, anti-working mothers campaign? Because when you look at a union contract, you do the same work, whether you're a male or a female, you get paid the same. There's tons of equality in a union contract when it comes to gender. So how do we fix this? In 2010, the Employee Free Choice Act was introduced. We had 60 votes in the Senate and a majority in the House. And it didn't get anywhere. So how do we fix this? How do we turn that back? And how are we making sure that we're pushing forward a worker-friendly agenda that benefits workers in this country?
Everybody know about Ask Me versus Janice? You all know what that is? There's a state employee in Illinois, correct, sir, who essentially is suing because about union dues, and it's about compulsory membership of unions. And this this court ruling, if the Supreme Court rules against labor, would really be a huge blow to organized labor in this country
And the party.
and to the party. But beyond that, working folks, right? People who are just trying to pay their mortgage and feed their family and send their kids to school. And so I think this is also a very important lesson of something I don't think we talk enough about. The Supreme Court nomination was briefly mentioned, but courts matter, judges matter. Perhaps the unfortunate legacy of this Trump era will be the judges he has appointed to the federal bench. When we talk about a lot of the issues that have come up today, the funding of elections and other issues, it comes back to the court system. And so one thing that I want you all to know is that the Senator is constantly looking for you guys to weigh in and talk with her and input on judicial nominees. She is opening up her doors for you all to engage with her. She's opening up her doors for you guys to come to hearings when we're bringing these people up. And this is essential, this is important. There are conversations about labor that we need to be asking of these nominees. Senator Feinstein is a ranking member on the Judiciary Committee. I am confident that when we went back to the Senate, she will be the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and it is Republican efforts through the courts that are peeling away at all the things that we have worked so hard for. Ask Me versus Janice is a perfect example of that. Citizens United is a perfect example of that. And other important rulings that have been against the progressive cause are an example of that. And so judges matter. It's not sexy. It's not something we talk a whole lot about, but this is a perfect example, and it's going to have repercussions for generations to come in this country. So I hope that's something you all will keep in mind as you cast your ballots.
So we don't only have Ask Me versus Janice right now. We also have the California rule case. Who's familiar with the California rule? Yeah, well, I'm a state worker, so I'm very familiar. So the California rule says instead of going by the contract, or the California rule protects us in our contracts with the state as state workers to keep our pension as contracted to us. So when I started working for the state 7-8 years ago, I actually signed a contract that includes that pension in it. So that's under attack as well. If the California rule gets overturned by the Supreme Court, we actually fall from a pension program down to a retirement of a reasonable amount. The reasonable is undefined. So that means our employer defines it. Jerry Brown's drooling over cutting pensions, and he won't even be in office. Jana's case, we needed it to further democratize and motivate workers to join unions. I think Jana's, if it passes, will actually help to do that. I hope to see workers get fired up and say we've had enough, who voluntarily go in and join their union because of Janice versus Ask Me. Obviously, we're dealing with a conservative Supreme Court, and we have a lot of issues there. But when we take over back the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we can push legislation to do these things. Until then, we need to fight on the local level, on the streets, protest, and join picket lines, like I've been doing this whole campaign.
Thanks, Mark, for your question. And I think with this court, last time we were saved by a heart attack on a hunting trip, right? Justice Scalia passed away, and I mean, from what I understand, they have about 15 more cases. If this one fails, that they can just reload with and appeal to the Supreme Court for a hearing. So if this doesn't pass, which most watchers of the court say it will, we do have a fight on our hands. And it's to undo the last facet that holds corporations from pretty much taking over all of America. So as a union member, I'm supported by the California State Nurses Union and SEIU, and I will fight for them every day while I'm in Washington, D.C. What this takes is electing 66 senators and gaining back 2/3 majority in the House of Representatives so we can pass a bill that will allow people to organize nationally. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
I think your question goes to a very basic issue that, again, we have to get to the root of. And I think what it comes down to is the Democratic Party was the party of the working men and women. Always was. It was the party of labor. It was the party that actually supported and pushed for not only labor unions, but for people who were struggling. This was the party that gave us things like the Tennessee Valley Authority and different programs that actually made working men and women's lives great. What we saw was, in the 1990s, a Democratic Party that drifted away because we had to win, drifted away and started taking Wall Street corporations. No longer can you consider us the working men and women party. You go down the street in the 1970s, ask anybody, who's the party of working men and women? Every single one of them say, that's the Democratic Party. You go down the street now and ask them, and they'll say, well, neither party. Neither party represents me. It's a broader question we get into in terms of right to work laws and stopping them, in terms of all the things we have to do for labor unions, because we all know that when labor was at its strongest, this country was at its strongest. We saw wages, we saw safety, we saw every single thing that we're looking for the labor movement. When it was at its strongest, this country had the strongest middle class we've ever had, and the strongest middle class any country's ever seen. We have to get back to being the party of working men and women and get away from Wall Street. That's how we're going to do it.
To answer your question, we solve this problem by reaching out to communities and ensuring they get involved with politics. For too long, the Democratic Party has neglected communities and their outreach efforts. In Justice Democrats, what we are doing right now with all my organizing volunteers will tell you, we are going to the communities, we are organizing them, we are educating them, and we are ensuring that they know what is best for them and the best way to safeguard their communities from exploitation. So what we will do is we will go out, organize, and ensure that we all understand that unions are there as a safeguard to ensure that we are all represented and fairly paid when we go to work.
I'm really sorry, but we are over time right now, and they have a minute to close, and you can always speak to them in person afterwards. Before we start, I'm going to allow you guys to pretend you can vote, and after they're done, we're going to do like a little applause. And basically, your applause represents, you could pretty much vote applause for any of these candidates. So anybody you feel like comfortable endorsing, applaud for them. So let's do the closing speeches, and then we'll do a thank you applause.
You can only vote once?
Oh, and you can vote more than once.
Thank you all for having us out here. The Allison Harsin campaign is truly honored to come and visit your group, and we look forward to organizing with you and going out and reaching to your communities to ensure we are safeguarding from corruption. Thank you all.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I really do appreciate it. I know that many of you probably didn't know who I was, and the first thought was, well, he looks a little like Joe Biden. That's about the closest I get. I can tell you this, let me just sort of conclude and say, look, I've been fighting this fight for a long time. You hear people talk about Bernie Sanders. I actually donated to Bernie back in the 1990s. Paul Tsongas, Bill Bradley, people like that. That's the people, those are my heroes and the people I work for. Paul Wellstone was one of the great heroes, one of the great Democrats in this country. That's who I've been fighting with and fighting for and donating for and fighting and campaigning for years. But there is only one Bernie Sanders. There is only one. What we've got to have is about 60 more who believe in the same principles, basic principles that he espouses. And that starts with, and you cannot be a progressive, as David said it, I'll take it a step further, and B, taking corporate donations. It's no different than saying I'm going to be a vegetarian, but I'm going to eat meat 4 days a week. Okay? It starts with that. That's the Bernie agenda. That's the first thing, the most important thing that his movement represented and what he's done and what we were able to do. We've got to continue that, and I do ask you very much, talk to me later on. Let's talk about what we can do, but thank you again so much for letting me come.
This is what democracy looks like. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. And Kevin is a character, or must be I say I, now a candidate that can show who can take corporate donations and still pass a progressive agenda for California. And I'll do that nationally. And how many seconds I got? And for 44 seconds, I'm going to give my time to this young lady over here who wanted to ask a question. And then we can hear it as a panel, and we can have a discussion with her.
I'm a public school teacher. I teach predominantly Latino kids in a Title I school, and I'm a strong union member. I've been a leader in California Teachers Association, and I remember Kevin De Leon really well when he used to work for CTA. However, I need to know what the stance is on charter schools and vouchers. And I want to know what you will do to preserve public education and keep public money in public education on.
In the interest of fairness, I think that we should all have a chance to answer that question, even if shortly. I'm against charters across the board. On my platform, on my website publicly since March last year. So that is an issue that I feel strongly about. We can't continue taking public money, and this is a bigger issue than just charter schools. We can't continue privatizing public things, public benefits. So we used to have tuition-free college in California. I'm sure some of you remember that. Some of you probably graduated on that system. I had some guy told me he paid $45 for college. Now most students have about $45,000 in debt, if not more. That parking fee is a nice one. So again, my name is David Hildebrand. I'm running out of time, so I have a website, davidforcalifornia.com. Lots of stuff at the table in the back. Come talk to me. I will be here probably as late as you guys are. So